A date that will live in infamy. Words that President Franklin Roosevelt used to describe the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. 2,400 Americans would die that day, and it officially brought the United States into World War II. Now, we've all seen the countless movies and read the countless books that have been written about that fateful day. But now, we've got a brand new account. Words from a naval officer discovered in a bedroom drawer.
My sister and I were probably ready to go to church, and we were outside playing.
Bill Wirth was only 3, but certain things are unforgettable.
This guy comes jogging up the street saying, "You kids get in your house now."
Wirth and his family, his mom, lived about 6 miles from Pearl Harbor on Honolulu. The morning of the attack and the weeks after were spent in his home, the nights in total darkness.
And they expected, I think, after such a devastating attack, that the next thing that would happen would be a landing force would land on the beaches, arrive virtually unopposed, probably at that point in time.
Terror. They were in the dark, literally, with enforced total blackouts at night, but also figuratively, because they had no idea what was going on with Bill's father, Theodore, who was the executive officer on board the USS Portland. While 2,400 Americans died that day, Theodore and his crew were fortunate to avoid that fate. They had been deployed offshore for exercises. But just a few years ago, a new light was shown on Bill's memories.
I think a treasure trove of things like that. I mean, this is a diary, pen and ink stuff.
His dad kept a journal from his time in the Navy.
A sentimental guy at heart, too.
And long after he had passed away, Bill found the binders, even pictures, in an old chest of drawers.
They couldn't believe what they were hearing on the radio about what was going on in Pearl Harbor.
And now Bill finds himself reading this entry from the diary each Pearl Harbor day.
Sunday morning, 7 December 1941, at about 0900, while engaged in preparing planes for catapulting, we received a dispatch from Sink Pack. "Pearl Harbor is being bombed. This is not a drill." End quote. Never shall I forget the horrified awe, the paled faces, the incredulous expressions as this word was passed.
The Japanese had snuck up on the United States, and Theodore and his Portland crew had to just sit there offshore, hoping to strike back. Robert Satino, one of the most distinguished World War II historians in our country, put simply, he says,
the Japanese wanted surprise. They wanted to shock American planners and military officers, and they certainly did the morning of December 7th, 1941.
Shock and surprise, 2 things the Japanese did for sure, as is made clear by the diary entry from when the Portland was cleared to come back into Pearl Harbor 6 days after the attack.
So we steamed through the harbor in the failing light. All hands topside just stood and stared. Gloom was as thick as fog. One wanted to cry.
But Wirth had noted in his journal, despite the massive casualties and damage to the fleet, the Japanese still left the repaired dry docks intact. And he noted that the fuel reserves on the base were left as well. Satino says this indicates one of the crucial mistakes the Japanese made that day.
If they had thought maybe a little more deeply about infrastructure, about the gigantic fuel tanks that were on the Hawaiian Islands that were powering the American fleet, about repair facilities that would repair the ships that had been damaged in Pearl Harbor, so launching maybe a second or third wave against that infrastructure, they might have put the U.S. fleet out of commission for a lot longer than they actually did.
But it just brought the U.S. into the war more quickly, and that led to what Satino says was the Japanese' second mistake.
That's picking a fight with the United States in the first place.
As for Bill, he and his family moved back to the mainland shortly after. He'd go on to the Naval Academy, was a submariner during the Cold War himself. A true naval historian, dating all the way back to when he was 3, and the rumblings of war were at his doorstep.
That's an insight into what it was like in the days following that attack, and how jangled everybody's nerves were.
An insight and connection with his father he may have never had, if not for his historic discovery in that old chest of drawers. Now, I really think you need to hear the entire diary entry, and it's about 4.5 minutes long, which is too long to put within that exact story. But what we have done is taken the whole raw read of Mr. Wirth reading his father's diary account of Pearl Harbor Day on firstcoastnews.com right now. If you go to our military section, you'll see it right there.
Oh, Luke, what a great story. First-hand account. And their biggest mistake, picking a fight with the United States in the first place. Folks, we are just beginning our coverage of the Voices of Valor. Tomorrow, I talk with a veteran who flew over Nagasaki just 5 hours after the atomic bomb was dropped. Voices of Valor every night at 6, only on First Coast News. Please join us.